Today on Sekulow, it's leaked to the press. Trump to be charged with 34 felony counts.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Well, it's more proof that Trump derangement syndrome is live and well in our nation's capital and, of course, these centers of power like New York when you have Michael Isikoff. He's a journalist at Yahoo. You might remember him as the journalist who wrote that there was a Kremlin connection to Trump and specifically Carter Page, and he got that info from the FBI. But then the FBI took his article that they provided the information for and got a FISA warrant against Carter Page, which we now know was totally illegitimate, that he was not a Russian asset. So this is who they decided, someone in the DA's office decided to go leak to. He also had the Steele dossier story. Yahoo News wouldn't publish it, or whoever he was with at the time. So he's been upset about that for a long time. So now he's got the leak from the DA. Of course, President Trump is not happy about this because, again, it goes through in great detail exactly how many counts there will be, and we'll see if it's correct, of course, very soon. We're going to be joining you again live at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time when President Trump is arraigned to go through the unsealed indictment. We're going to have a team of attorneys to go through it and see if it matches what is being reported. But I want to go right now to my dad who's joining us now. And, Dad, just right off the bat to Jay Sekulow, we saw in the Isikoff piece, and he is a known person for the government to go leak to, that it looks like it is those 34 felony charges all relate to the falsification of business records, which in New York you have to prove is connected to another crime. And even if you do that, it's a Class E felony, which is the lowest level felony, usually doesn't have any jail time.
Well, that's right. I mean, the fact of the matter is that from a legal standpoint, that under New York law, each of the business entries that they're focusing on here, or apparently focusing on in this indictment, would be, at best, if you could even make that case, a misdemeanor. So that's number one. Number two, they're trying to then tie it to a felony so that they can up all of the charges then to a felony. The problem with that is the felony that they're relying on is a federal election law violation, with both the Justice Department and the FEC said does not exist here. And when you put those two elements together, you're back to a misdemeanor. And, of course, a misdemeanor doesn't have all of this. So this is the reality of what we're dealing with. It's very much a political prosecution. I think that the leak of the indictment to Isikoff is very troubling because this is, if the judge admonishes anybody today, it should be the district attorney for allowing this leak to take place, not issuing First Amendment gag orders on the defendant.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. Is there's still a discussion that there could be gag orders issued on President Trump and his ability to discuss this. I mean, still in the Drudge headline. But you've got people inside the DA's office leaking out details of what is probably the most high-profile indictment in U.S. history because it's the first time a president or former president that has ever been indicted. So, of course, what do they end up? The night before, they go right to their friends in the mainstream media, Michael Isikoff, who got the FISA warrant basically on Carter Page and did the FBI's bidding for that. So they went to him to do their bidding with the DA's office.
Well, that's exactly right. And here's the problem. First of all, I thoroughly looked at the law yesterday on this idea of a gag order being placed on the president. And the fact of the matter is there's just no legal justification for it. New York has adopted the highest standard, strict scrutiny, so they don't allow it. In very rare circumstances. But the idea that you'd admonish the defendant and say you can't exercise your free speech rights, including political speech, while at the same time then saying to the DA nothing about leaking the indictment before it was unsealed is absurd.
All right, folks, we're going to take your calls, Logan, at 1-800-684-3110. We want people to share this. They're on Rumble. Share it with their friends and family and subscribe to our page.
Yeah, make sure you're subscribed and following all of our page. We are right now broadcasting live, so if you have a lot to say, we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-684-3110. Have your voice heard today. 1-800-684-3110. We'll be right back with more on Sekulow.
Today at this New York City courthouse, a turning point in American history. In a matter of hours, former President Donald Trump is expected to surrender to authorities who will place him under arrest and process him before the 45th president enters a courtroom to face New York State Judge Juan Merchan.
Around midday today, Trump is set to leave Trump Tower and head to the criminal court in Lower Manhattan to surrender. Trump would be fingerprinted. Then he's set to be arraigned at 2:15 p.m.
Overnight, Judge Merchan ruling in Mr. Trump's favor, agreeing to keep television cameras out of today's hearing, as his lawyers requested, but allowing them to set up in a hallway outside the courtroom. A group of still photographers will be allowed to take photos in the courtroom before the proceedings begin.
He'll be fingerprinted and processed inside the building behind me. We understand, however, that he will not get a DNA swab, and it's unclear at this point whether there will be a mugshot. It looks like that will not be the case.
The story that broke last night was Michael Isikoff. He's the American journalist, works now for Yahoo News. He has a tip that Trump will be placed under arrest today and informed that he has been charged with 34 felony counts. We were thinking one felony count. He's saying all 34 counts will be felonies for falsification of business records, bumped up to a Class E felony, which is the lowest level of felony in New York. Bragg says that Trump was intending to conceal another underlying crime. And under New York State Penal Code, a Class E felony can result in prison terms of up to 4 years.
This is according to Yahoo News. The only way they would know such things is if there was a leak from the Manhattan DA's office, because this indictment remains sealed.
Who's responsible for leaking a sealed indictment with 30 counts? This is so dangerous. This is what banana republics do. It's what failed states do. We cannot let our justice system be politicized. That's exactly what the Democrat Party is doing.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls too at 1-800-684-3110. We know this afternoon at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time, President Trump will be arraigned. The indictment will be unsealed. We're going live again on Rumble, so you will be able, and we're going to go through that unsealed indictment, really to make sure that there's no surprises there. Does it track with what has been now leaked to the media even last night, 34 felony counts? But I want to go to Andy Economo on that because, Andy, that sounds pretty intense to people. But I want to break it down. If in fact it's what's being reported, it's basically the same crime charged 34 different ways.
That's exactly right.
Counted 34 different
That's
ways.
right. It's not. It is creative draftsmanship to make it sound like it's much worse than it really is. It's like a mail fraud case. If you have a scheme to defraud an insurance company, and it's one scheme that you're going to defraud, every time you put a letter in the mailbox, that's a count. And you can have 100 letters. So what they're doing to President Trump is they're taking this alleged falsification of records and saying every time there was an entry made, every time there's an alleged payment made, every time that someone put a pen to paper, every time someone made an entry into a business records of the enterprise, whatever it was, that is a count. And when you collapse it, it's really one thing and not 34 things altogether. And that's what makes it a felony, however, is that you have to have an intent. When you make this false entry, the government, the state in this case, has to prove an intent to commit another crime. You can't just make the false entry without also proving that the person who made the entry intended to commit another crime. And that's going to be very hard to do in this case, especially when the feds have looked at this and said, there ain't no other crime that was to be committed. And yet the state persists in this accusation.
We've got a petition up at ACLJ.org, Logan, to stop the political persecution and prosecution of President Trump. I mean, this is just the beginning. I mean, and it's not really the beginning. We've seen, I'll go to Dad on this. Dad, we've seen special counsels, 2 impeachments. We've seen the January 6th committee. We have the DA in Fulton County, a DA in New York, Alvin Bragg, bringing the charges today. A special counsel investigating Mar-a-Lago and the classified documents. I mean, and the New York Attorney General on civil matters. So it is unbelievable what they are trying to do and what they have decided to do. These are all politically motivated actors to take down President Trump, or the other option is elevate President Trump and bring him back to news because they think they want him to be the Republican nominee. But the sick part is we shouldn't be playing politics with our legal system.
Oh, I think we're having a connection issue. We'll go back to him in just a second.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people calling, and we want you to call in as well.
That is what I think is troubling, though, is that whatever you think about the politics of this, I mean, obviously it's helping President Trump right now. He raised $8 million in a day.
It's no doubt.
His poll numbers are over 50%. DeSantis dropped considerably.
I said yesterday, this is the platforming of Donald Trump, whether they want to make it be a big news story, whether people are going to think it's a negative or a positive. At the end of the day, you had a person who could not post on social media for the mainstream social media for the past 3 years. Now all of a sudden is dominating the news cycle in a way that will rile up a base. Because I don't think the people who are doing this understand the way that the Trump supporter thinks. And they don't think about the fact that this, all it does is play into what he's been saying for the last close to 10 years now. And it feels like that's the part of this puzzle that they don't understand. Whether you support President Trump or whether you don't, I think there's a lot of great people who are considering running and so on. You can't look at this and not go, well, this isn't part of that story. This doesn't play into it. And if you're not seeing it from the other side, if you are one of our super liberal viewers who's watching this broadcast, you're playing right into it. You're playing right into it because I know we've talked about sort of what the end goal here is, because these counts, if there's this many counts, as a lawyer, you guys can kind of fill me in. I mean, what's worst case scenario?
In this case?
Yeah.
He pays a fine.
That's right. He's certainly not going to jail. That's ridiculous.
And that's worst case
But that's
scenario.
what they're trying to make you feel like. They're trying to evoke emotion of someone going to jail.
And I don't think he's going to pay a fine. I think it could be actually. I want to go to data this. I mean, there's a lot of talk. One, that this could get moved. He wants it moved to Staten Island, where he thinks it would be a fair trial, fair jury. I agree with that.
In New York City?
Manhattan.
I think so.
And it would still keep it close. It would be a little bit safer, easier, because it gets it outside of Manhattan proper. But the second part of this is that the first thing people are going to watch is whether or not this is dismissed outright because it's a made-up charge.
Well, that's exactly right. I think the first thing you're going to see, and you'll see this today, there'll be motions to dismiss talked about, at least the filing. And in that motion to dismiss process, you will actually argue that the charges that are made are here, to take lack of a better word, are trumped up. In other words, they don't exist as a real case under New York law. But, Fox News is reporting right now that this gag order thing could be real. I want to go back to that for a second. Yeah. The idea that a judge would impose a gag order on the Republican, a former president who's running again for election and as the Republican, basically the candidate for the Republican Party in the primaries.
The candidate by 35 points.
So the idea that a federal state court judge would come in and say, you cannot discuss this political situation, and at the same time not say anything to Alvin Bragg. First of all, that gag order under New York law will not, if it does get issued, should be dismissed immediately. And I will be very curious to see if this judge says anything at all about what Alvin Bragg's office did by leaking this indictment to Isikoff.
That's why I want to get to, Andy, which is, President Trump said, they've talked about self-pardoning a lot with President Trump. Has not happened. But President Trump said, Alvin Bragg should indict himself. Over this leak.
He certainly controls the grand jury, which is not surprising in any jurisdiction. The district attorney basically controls what the grand jury does. But for one of the things that he has done, he ought to go to the grand jury and say, please indict me because I have violated the law as well by the leak and by my conduct in perverting the justice system. That's what really bothers me, Jordan, is the perversion of the justice system. I was in the criminal justice system most of my career as a prosecutor in the United States Attorney's Office and in the district attorney's office. We never politicized the system. You don't politicize the system. If it's a crime, you prosecute it on its merits. You don't make politics your goal. And that's what Alvin Bragg has done here. He has politicized the criminal justice system in New York County. And that is a shame, indeed a crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to this, Dad, just the idea, none of us want to be in a situation where we're mocking the criminal justice system in America, but they've put us in a place where if it becomes purely a political tool, that's exactly how the world's going to see it too. It is not just mocking. They are, in a sense, tarnishing or trashing the entire system of law which our nation is based on.
Well, listen, this is exactly what I argued to the Supreme Court of the United States on behalf of then President Trump when I said this law, allowing this to take place, weaponizes 2,300 elected district attorneys who are accountable to their local constituencies. That constituency in Manhattan is very much opposed to President Trump and his policies. And exactly what we said at the Supreme Court is precisely what has happened. I mean, that is what has happened. And it's exactly what the Founding Fathers warned against, to not allow the criminal justice system to become weaponized to silence political opponents.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to continue to take your calls too at 1-800-684-3110. We want you to sign that petition at ACLJ.org as well.
We also have a lot of new viewers right now on Rumble because Rumble's featuring us. So I'm going to ask you to click that follow button. We're almost to 200,000 followers. If you're brand new to this broadcast,
let's see if we get there today.
Yeah, let's see if we can do it. Let's try to get to 200,000. Later today, actually, on another channel we have that's a bit more loose, I would say, a little bit more fun. Sekulow Brothers. Make sure you look that up at the end. It's my brother, Jordan, who's your host today, and me, and we're going to be breaking this down live with legal experts to go through it. So make sure you're subscribed over on that channel. You either go to SekulowBrothers.com and find all of them, or just go on, if you're on Rumble, just search Sekulow Brothers when you get a second. But I'm going to ask you right now to click that follow button if you are on Rumble, because a lot of you are brand new. We do this show each and every day, and we have for the last 25 plus years. So, if you're new on Rumble, just do it right now. Hit that follow button.
And we know, Andy, that this could just be the beginning. I mean, this DA charge, and we could see this happening in Fulton County. We could see it happening in a federal grand jury setting. We could see it happening in a civil matter in the New York AG.
Yeah, you ran down the list of the things that they have been pursuing President Trump about and over since 2015, and it really brought them all back to me, the various jurisdictions that have been really out to get him, the FBI, the various prosecutors and special counsels, and none of them has succeeded, and I don't think Bragg is going to succeed. But this is a danger of localizing politics to the particular wants and needs of a particular district attorney. As in Fulton County, you've got basically a fabricated prosecution there. You've got the form person of the grand jury yapping about what happened within the grand jury. You've got Alvin Bragg in New York basically fabricating a criminal case. This can happen to anybody, and it's very dangerous indeed.
Yeah, folks, we are going to continue to take your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. Support the work of the ACLJ at ACLJ.org. There's an ACLJ angle to this, both the petition at ACLJ.org that you can sign. That doesn't cost a thing. But we're also going to be looking at if a gag order is issued, that's a constitutional matter, First Amendment matter, which we would certainly get involved in as the American Center for Law and Justice. So this is a great time to support our work. And as Logan said, to stay up to speed with us, because this is just the beginning of this legal trial and tribulation of President Trump. We'll be right back.
The Freedom of Information Act allows people to petition their government and ask for the background information as to why they came to a certain decision.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
We are entitled as citizens of the United States to know about how our government works.
Government agencies acting out of control.
They want to keep Americans in the dark. That's why it's incredibly important to have the ACLJ constantly pushing to find out what the background information is.
Do you remember the Iran deal? There was a video about what took place on that deal, and it was edited. And the edit took out the key part of what was going on. State Department, White House, editing videos to keep it from the American public.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that. And because of it, it's a very weak government agency that used to be the scary government agency.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. Because of the litigation we engaged in, it's a different agency. They can't do what they were doing before.
We've got the declassified list of Obama administration officials who started asking to unmask. And they've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
All of this information came because we went to court to get the information.
The power of Washington, D.C. only works when the rest of us, the rest of Americans, are kept in the dark.
We may find one item of information in thousands of documents of irrelevancies, but we persist and we're on it every day of our lives.
The work that the ACLJ does matters. It matters to policymakers, it matters to ordinary citizens all across America.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Think we haven't been on this, folks? We've been on it. All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls, too. Questions, comments, 1-800-684-3110. I would ask you this, too, because obviously this is a legal matter, but you can't ignore the politics of this. For good or for ill, the Democrat DA has decided to make this a political issue, and the Biden DOJ has decided to make this a political issue with the special counsel, even though he's got his own special counsel investigating his handling of classified documents. So how do you bring charges against one and not the other? But that's a different matter than New York. The idea is that they have made it political, and what I want to hear from you is, do you think it's more likely now, not that President Trump becomes the Republican nominee, because I think right now he's pretty much on path for that, barring something wild happening. And that, by the way, is different than I would have said even 2 weeks ago. But do you think this actually makes it easier for him to get back to the White House, or do you think that's what the Democrats want? Is it from a mainstream kind of middle-of-the-road voter, they're just seeing chaos? Yeah. So get your calls on that, 1-800-684-3110. And, Logan, we can go to the phone.
Yeah, we can. And one actually interesting thing I wanted to talk to you about before we go to the phones is this actually came out of the state of Florida this morning, and I read Florida news because I'm a property owner there, and it's something I'm always following. It said DeSantis actually still has a lead in Florida in the polls that they're doing, but only about 6 points in his home state. That is an interesting thing. The headline was DeSantis still in the lead. And then when you read the article, in his home state, and maybe the most popular time up until the last few weeks as governor, it does seem to be slipping right now.
Yes.
Unfortunately, because I do think he'd be a good candidate, as well as a lot of people who are running. I don't think any of the people who are running right now, I mean, all of them you'd probably prefer to another President Biden. Right. So it's not like I'm discounting that. It's more like, this is how the country is shifting. Let's go ahead, though, like I said, and take some calls. Let's go to Joanne, who's calling in Ohio. You're on the line.
Hi, guys. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, which I kind of do because you guys are so smart. But I don't understand how you parlay this into campaign violation when it's Trump's personal funds.
Well, okay, so when you're a candidate for office, you can donate to your own campaign. You have no limits at the federal level. So, I don't want to get into the state issues, but if you're a federal candidate, you can loan your campaign unlimited amount of money. You can give your campaign unlimited amount. Now, we can't do that. Individuals have limits. PACs have limits if you're directly funding the campaign. There's also, then you have to file documents with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. That's where this becomes an issue, Andy, at all, is whether it was filed the right way. The FEC has decided, unlike in the Hillary Clinton matter where she was fined for the Steele dossier being filed as a legal expense instead of a campaign expense. Same exact situation. Is it a legal expense or a campaign expense? They said that one was so outrageous she was fined. In this matter, they said nothing to see here.
No, that's exactly right. There is no federal election commission violation, no federal campaign violation. Now, that being said, and the Federal Election Commission being the arbiter of whether there is a federal violation, where in the world is Bragg going with his case? Because you got to falsify a business record if you're guilty of this crime with intent to defraud that includes an intent to commit another crime. If there is no other crime, no federal crime, then how in the world do you say that the president is guilty, President Trump is guilty of this falsifying business records in the first degree? You can't do that because there's no underlying federal crime that he was intending to violate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets the heart of the issue is even as politicized as the DOJ is, they passed on this. The FEC passed on this. Two different federal agencies. One could have brought fines. They didn't. They did fine Hillary Clinton's campaign for what they are claiming to be is a similar matter, which is that the Steele dossier was paid for through a law firm, and they marked it down as a legal expense, even though it wasn't a legal expense. It was opposition research for the campaign. So the campaign paid a financial penalty, which, by the way, in the world of politics is no big deal, especially presidential politics. The idea that you might have to pay, that something was filed wrong and you pay a penalty later on, no big deal. Again, no one's going to jail over that. No one's being indicted over that. What is happening here, Andy, and what is so absurd is that it's the exact same fact pattern, but the federal government decided this was even probably more on the line. So there was not a clear violation of the federal law. Right. There was not a clear violation of election law. So not even a fine. And yet this DA wants to turn it into a felony.
Well, this is the problem that you get when you've got 2,300 prosecutors across the country who want to weigh in on this so as to get a name for themselves, to go out and say, who can I target, like Senator Rubio said, who can I go against, how can I catapult myself into the national spotlight? I know what I'll do. I will take a falsification of a business record, and I will say that he did that with intent to commit a federal elections violation, which I can't prove, and which the federal government said is not a crime, but I'll indict him for it because I control the grand jury, and they're going to do what I say, and they're going to then make me the star of the show, Alvin Bragg. That's wrong. It's the politicization of the criminal justice system that is, it's sinful. It really is. It is that bad.
Yeah, I want to go to the phones. 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. We've got a second half hour coming up. Your questions, your comments, and the political ramifications. I want to get back to that, Logan, as well. We'll take Lewis's call out of Colorado on line 3. But then for people who want to call in, how do you think this plays out politically? I mean, we're in election season now. Does this elevate? Obviously, it's elevating Donald Trump in the Republican primary. How do you think it impacts in a general election if he makes it through the primary, which looks like right now, if the election were held today, the Republican primary, he would. 1-800-684-3110 to join us on the show for that second half hour. Hey, Lewis, welcome to the show. You're on the air.
Yes. My question is, if the case, hopefully, maybe it will be dismissed, will the indictment, fingerprint, everything be expunged from his record if it gets dismissed?
Go ahead, Andy.
No, the answer is no. You can't rewrite history. The fact of an indictment, the fact of the fingerprinting and all, whatever happens, you don't change that. If it gets dismissed, it just is dismissed. But you cannot then expunge what the grand jury did and pretend that it didn't happen. Yeah, horrible though it is.
President Trump was impeached twice. He was acquitted from the impeachment. The House impeached him. So that's historic. The Senate acquitted him both times. But you can't remove the fact that he was impeached twice. I mean, that's the same kind of issue in a political matter. I will say this, though. We have impeachment to handle these political processes. That's why they exist, to keep it out of the criminal justice system so that these individuals who are elected to be prosecutors aren't playing politics with our elected leaders, especially the most important elected leader we have in our country, the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, and we hope continues to be the leader of the free world. As we go into that second half hour, your thoughts on this politically. One, in the Republican primary, what does it mean? Right now we're seeing a surge by Donald Trump. He raised $8 million in 24 hours, which he had been struggling in grassroots fundraising. That's grassroots fundraising. That's not just big checks from big donors. So that's been a huge boost to his campaign. His poll numbers have gone up by 20 points in the lead up to this indictment. So the question is, what does it do in the Republican primary? But my second question to you is, what would it mean in a general election matchup? We also have Joe Biden saying he's not going to announce what his plans are until the fall, which I think he's trying to block the other Democrat candidates from being able to run. We'll take your calls. Support our work. The Matching Challenge, ACLJ.org. Double the impact your donation and sign the petition. That's absolutely free to stop the political prosecution of President Trump, ACLJ.org. The ACLJ has a 30-plus year history of fighting on behalf of you, our members, in support of life,
abortion's murder,
religious liberty.
A Turkish court has freed American pastor Andrew Brunson.
Justice, personal freedom, and constitutional government. Our freedoms are under attack. Now, more than ever.
We are not going back. Abortion is out there.
Yet another week of violence.
They use their power and influence to push deeply un-American causes that threaten to destroy our country. Abortion on demand, socialism, inflation, cancel culture, weakness in the face of our adversaries. We owe it to our kids and grandkids to defend the things that make this country great. It's time to take the gloves off
and uphold American values. Go to acljaction.org to learn more.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Hey, welcome back to Sekulow. If we are talking to you on terrestrial radio on Sirius XM, or if you're watching on places like Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube, Rumble is our preferred place for you to watch because there's no censorship there. And we are asking, we've got a lot of folks joining us right now to follow us on Rumble. And the reason why is because throughout these processes, we're going to be coming back live. We have our daily show every day, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern time. We're here Monday through Friday. But during the political season, especially with these legal challenges, we will often come back throughout the day with updates and live updates. In fact, through our Sekulow Brothers podcast, we'll be doing that today when the arraignment starts to break down really quickly for you, basically, is it the charges we expected? Is there any surprise in there? So that you understand exactly what they are trying to charge President Trump with. And because right now it's all just been leaks to the media, which have been insane, especially the leak last night. I want to remind you, the leak to that reporter was the same reporter who the FBI planted the information about Carter Page that led to the FISA warrant on an American citizen, which was later found to be totally bogus. They lied to the FISA court to get that. But this is the same reporter, Isikoff, who did that story, who now is leaking this story. We will see if he's correct that the 34 charges are basically all related to the same act. An act which the FEC said was not a election violation, so no penalty, financial penalty. An act which the Department of Justice said was not a crime and not worth prosecuting. But a local DA in Manhattan has decided he's going to go all in on charging President Trump with something that has never been tried before in court.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go back to the phones here in a second, but I did want to say, as you were telling people to follow this channel, also follow the Sekulow Brothers channel. For our social media team who's watching right now, I'm going to ask you, will you put it in the chat? Put the link to what you need to do to follow Sekulow Brothers. You can go to SekulowBrothers.com or just rumble.com/Sekulow Brothers. Follow that. That's the channel. We're going to go live at 2:15 Eastern time to break that all down. So if you're on this channel, this is sort of our main hub, and then we're going to have that one for the live broadcast today at 2:15 Eastern. So make sure you're following that channel as well. Again, for our social team, if you wouldn't mind posting that in the comments so our viewers have an easy link to get to. You want to go ahead and take this call?
Absolutely.
Let's go, Charlie in California. You're on the air.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I just have a comment. I'm 60 years old, and I've been, watching all of this going on, and I have never, ever in my life ever seen anybody, any politicians or anybody going after somebody so hard. And the only thing I'm thinking of is Donald Trump must have a lot of dirt on some of these politicians. I
think that it might feel that way, but I actually think he doesn't. Because they wouldn't be doing this to him. He's not a politician. They try to make him out to be this criminal-like actor, like a mob boss. He has been working in New York, which is not easy, and building buildings all over the world, golf courses, resorts, skyscrapers. You have to follow rules to a T. You got to work with labor unions. You got to work with city councils. And of course, there's issues along the way. But this idea that he's some kind of criminal is just a made-up fabrication, Logan. It's this. They tried to make him. Oh, he must have dirt on all these people. He's not. He's not from the political world of this back and forth. And so, in fact, I think that's opened him up to more of these kind of attacks.
Yeah,
because they're not afraid of going against a dynasty here. It's not like taking on the Bidens or the Bushes.
Yeah, it's an unprecedented time for sure, and we're seeing a lot of this kind of feedback, and a lot of people commenting similar things. Who knows how today goes? It's like you said, it's a sad day and somewhat, but it is also a very interesting day to follow this whole process. As someone who enjoys the process of watching how politics plays out, it is a very entertaining and engaging day, even if you disagree what's happening. So we're going to make sure we keep this coverage going. We're going to take more of your calls. You can also get support the work of the ACLJ while you're at it. Go to aclj.org. Not only can you donate, make a nonprofit donation, also, you can give us a call, 1-800-684-3110. Rick Grinnell's coming up, though, in the next segment.
Yeah, that's right. And again, we're going to continue to take your phone calls at 1-800-684-3110. We have a petition on this, which is gaining steam, and again, to stop the political prosecutions of President Trump. You go to ACLJ.org, you sign that petition. Congress has a role to play here. That's who we're supporting, getting this info. We'll be right back.
Today at this New York City courthouse, a turning point in American history. In a matter of hours, former President Donald Trump is expected to surrender to authorities who will place him under arrest and process him before the 45th president enters a courtroom to face New York State Judge Juan Merchan.
Around midday today, Trump is set to leave Trump Tower and head to the criminal court in Lower Manhattan to surrender. Trump would be fingerprinted. Then he's set to be arraigned at 2:15 p.m.
Overnight, Judge Merchan ruling in Mr. Trump's favor, agreeing to keep television cameras out of today's hearing, as his lawyers requested, but allowing them to set up in a hallway outside the courtroom. A group of still photographers will be allowed to take photos in the courtroom before the proceedings begin.
He'll be fingerprinted and processed inside the building behind me. We understand, however, that he will not get a DNA swab, and it's unclear at this point whether there will be a mugshot. It looks like that will not be the case.
The story that broke last night was Michael Isikoff. He's the American journalist, works now for Yahoo News. He has a tip that Trump will be placed under arrest today and informed that he has been charged with 34 felony counts. We were thinking one felony count. He's saying all 34 counts will be felonies for falsification of business records, bumped up to a Class E felony, which is the lowest level of felony in New York. Bragg says that Trump was intending to conceal another underlying crime. And under New York State Penal Code, a Class E felony can result in prison terms of up to 4 years.
This is according to Yahoo News. The only way they would know such things is if there was a leak from the Manhattan DA's office, because this indictment remains sealed.
Who's responsible for leaking a sealed indictment with 30 counts? This is so dangerous. This is what banana republics do. It's what failed states do. We cannot let our justice system be politicized. That's exactly what the Democrat Party is doing.
Sekulow, we'll continue to take your phone calls at 1-800-684-3110. Remember, we're going to come back live at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time when President Trump is arraigned. We've got a team of attorneys who are going to go through the unsealed indictment and really just confirm whether or not what has been now leaked is correct, or are there any surprises, any surprise charges? We want to be able to walk through that for you so that you know exactly what President Trump is being charged with today when he is arraigned. So that's going to happen through the Sekulow Brothers podcast on Rumble, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Rick Renell is joining us now. They're Senior Advisor for Foreign Policy and National Security. And Rick, I wanted to kind of put this up because you tweeted out this morning that the Biden administration has now given out your emails when you were ambassador to Germany and many when you were the Director of National Intelligence to various left-wing nonprofits who file FOIAs like we file, and they never gave you a heads up. You find out through press stories. They gave out your State Department emails within a year of you leaving. And as you write in a second tweet, you know, groups like the ACLJ, we have to fight in court for sometimes years to get this kind of information, and hardly ever from the intelligence community.
Yeah, it's really a sad situation because there's just two different standards. There's two sets of rules, and I think everybody knows that. There's one set of rules if you are a conservative, and there's another set of rules if you aren't a conservative. And what is a tragedy to me is within a year, think about that, and I know you guys are experts on all these FOIA requests, but within a year, my emails as the ambassador to Germany, so they were the State Department emails, were given in 3 batches to left-wing media organizations and NGOs. And, of course, they perused every one of them. You know, they didn't come up with anything. We all would have heard it for sure if there was anything in those. But the larger point of the double standard is what's really troubling to me, because we here at ACLJ are constantly trying to uncover information that the government is trying to cover up so that we can share with the American public and be transparent. The emails that they went after for me were just anything and everything to do with my job.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference. You know, we don't do it to be mean or nasty. We do it specifically. In fact, to actually get a FOIA successfully through, as you said, I mean, we do this a lot. You have to be extremely specific. Usually, the first time you're very specific, and they want you to get even more specific. You can't just say generally, "Hey, I want all the emails from this person at Homeland Security." No, that would never fly. That would get thrown out immediately. And even when you get very specific, you got to take that and get even more specific to terms, words, dates, time frames, to who, from who. I mean, that's the normal process, as it should be, to get this information. But we're seeing the double standard play out because, Rick, I wanted to tie it to this. Last night, we see the breaking news. There's Michael Isikoff again, who leaked the story about Carter Page, and then the FBI used it to get a FISA on Carter Page, which was totally bogus. Now he's leaking out from the district attorney's office.
Yeah, look, there's a long history of Michael Isikoff having ties to the Democratic Party and all of the people that just moved from Washington to New York and Justice Department to the State Department to DOD. It's the same crowd. It's always anonymous. It's always half-truths. And somebody like Michael Isikoff doesn't even care if it's truthful. He just wants to be able to say, I've got this scoop of what someone is saying. So it's really gossip. It's the type of information that is unverified, not detailed in its facts. It's always general information. And the double standard, I think, is shocking. We should absolutely do investigations of who is doing these leaks. It's against the law to be leaking, and someone should be indicted for it.
Yeah, I mean, this idea, again, I think, too, Rick, the politics of this is just very interesting to people because I think, one, I know people are seeing President Trump poll numbers go up, fundraising went up big this afternoon, but this is still a sad day for our country. Because even if this politically benefits President Trump, and I think it is right now, and I think the Democrats have really overcalculated this move here, this is still a very sad day for the country because the legal system, for the first time ever, is being used to go after a former president. Never happened in history. And you can just see how this unravels into chaos across the country with 2,300 DAs, some who are Republican who are going to say, you know what, we're going to start going after the Democrats. And then our whole system of the rule of law starts falling apart.
Look, I know that there are dictators around the world. There are leaders in other countries who would be very jealous of what's happening in Washington, D.C. When the ruling party is able to use its power to arrest the opposition figure, the leading opposition figure, the clear one who is going to be running against them in the next election, to arrest him and try to get him not to run, which is, Joe Biden has been very clear. He doesn't want Donald Trump even running. So the entirety of the Biden followers, the Democrats, are going to follow what Joe Biden is saying. He is in control. He's put out the directive that we should stop Donald Trump from even running. And dictators around the world are envious that he's able to get away with it by having a chorus of media in Washington, D.C., not criticize him for it. I mean, the most you're seeing from the media is saying, oh, I found a poll where Americans may not like it. That's not criticism. That's factual polls. What the media needs to be able to do is understand this slippery slope. When the ruling party arrests the opposition leader, this is where the State Department usually jumps in and condemns this behavior, but it's happening in our country.
Yeah, but this is unacceptable, Logan. As Rick said, we point this out in other countries. We say going after your political opponents through saying you're using the rule of law. That's what we say Putin does.
Yeah, and that's how no one ever decides to run for president again. Because a situation where as soon as you are no longer in power, your political opponents will do what they can to try to imprison you. And that is what happens in a lot of these countries worldwide. And we see that. We've seen it play out dozens of times. It goes, well, at least that's not America. That's not what happens here. But it is what happens in these countries time after time after time. as soon as another dictatorial regime comes in, guess what happens to the previous one? He's usually put in jail, killed in the streets, wild stuff happens. We don't do that here. We've actually been the beacon of not doing that here. We talked about how even growing up, when they talked about Nixon, they're like, well, he pardoned Nixon because it was for the betterment of the country. Right. That's the way we were educated. That, yeah, Nixon did bad things. However, we decided as a country to be able to move on. But to move on as a country, we were not going to put the country through that while there were still so many supporters.
Founding fathers had it's impeachments in the Constitution. If you want to remove a president and try, which the Democrats tried twice to remove, once after he was president, President Trump, which is absurd. But there's a political process to do it. So you don't have to resort to the legal system. There's a political process set up by our founding fathers in a genius way. It's very difficult, a very high bar, but it's there. And so, Rick, the idea that even the fact that the Department of Justice said we're not getting involved in this, the FEC said we're not getting involved in this, to me, it is just, listen, if it was anybody other than Donald Trump, this would be overwhelming. This would be financially, to have this many attorneys in this many different states, while you're still trying to campaign for office. Like Logan said, if you're anyone else, you're looking at this saying, I don't want to get involved in politics.
Well, it's not only that, but I think the analogy of dictators and others around the world not getting pushback from the media, I think, is one of the key elements here, because what we have in the United States that is unique and different is a press that is unafraid to challenge government officials when they overreach. But what we see over the last several years is an entirety of the newsrooms in Washington, D.C., that they are afraid. They're either afraid to stand up to Joe Biden, and maybe it's because their social life suffers in Washington, D.C. They don't get the dinner party invites. Their kids at school don't have the right friends because they're ostracized by that, political community. They're either afraid or they totally believe in what's happening and they're cheerleaders. Either way, they shouldn't be journalists. You have to be brave to be a journalist. You have to be able to call out both sides and be unbiased to be a journalist. And I think that the reason why Joe Biden is getting more brazen and going after his political opponents is because he's unchecked. There isn't anyone standing up to him in the media saying, this is terrible. But I do believe, to give our listeners a little bit of hope, I do believe outside of Washington, D.C. and New York, that regular people, independents, see this and are outraged.
I think that is exactly what we are seeing. We'll take your calls about that when we come back at 1-800-684-3110. The politics of this, can't ignore it. We'll be right back.
We hear something. When we're concerned about an issue, we don't just talk about it. We do something about it. And that goes to our Government Accountability Project.
If we allow leaders in Washington, D.C. to make decisions behind closed doors, unaccountable to the people, then we are going to get skewed and corrupt decisions.
There are lots of other places that do lots of important work for America, but the ACLJ has taken up a lane which is irreplaceable.
The Freedom of Information Act, that's a statute that allows us to get information from the government. Starts with a letter from our offices in Washington to these agencies. And it says, give us this information on these topics. And generally, they don't. And then we go to court.
We go through a series of lengthy negotiations back and forth about what they'll give or what they won't give. We may get tons of information that's redacted, and we have to then go back and say, you redacted too much. We can't really find out what you're giving us because it makes no sense. So it goes through a process of litigation.
That is how you get information, and that office is going to be more active now more than ever.
The ACLJ has been extremely active in vigorously seeking to hold these bureaucrats accountable. We have filed hundreds of FOIA requests. We have received over 20,000 pages of documents in our litigation.
Holding them accountable, holding the Biden administration accountable so that all Americans are able to have faith in their government.
We will up our efforts. We will not stop.
You're finding a nugget in a gold mine. Occasionally you'll come up with something that is really a bombshell, but you have to persist in doing it, and that's what we do.
That's a little bit of what we do through our Office of Government Accountability, and of course that comes under our Office of Government Affairs. So your support of the ACLJ supports all of that.
Welcome back to Sekulow, finishing up the show today. Give us a call at 1-800-684-3110. But however, if you are watching live right now, guess what? At 2:15 Eastern time, we will be back with a whole nother live broadcast breaking down specifically with lawyers and a whole team, media experts and legal experts. We're going to go through all of the counts of the indictment, and we're going to talk about them in real time live. And the only place to find that is if you're on Rumble, go to the Sekulow Brothers channel. I'll ask my team again to post it in the comments. Just search Sekulow Brothers, or you can find it there. Thousands of you join us each and every day. I appreciate that. So it's another great place. It's a little bit of a different tone. We're a little more uncensored. It's still definitely fine to listen to with your family, but we're a little bit more free. We're not on terrestrial radio or satellite radio, so there's no ad breaks. We're able to just keep going and talking about what's going on. There's it's just a much different kind of broadcast, more like a podcast. So you can find us there today, 2:15, the Sekulow Brothers podcast, live analysis of the Trump indictment. It should be pretty interesting to watch, so I encourage you to do that. Also, if you're brand new to the broadcast, which I know thousands of you probably are right now, follow this channel on Rumble. Click the follow button. It's pretty easy. It's right under me speaking right now. And then you get to see this show each and every day. I did want to play a bite from Marco Rubio that kind of sets the stage of what could happen if this continues on. Let's hear from Senator Rubio.
And now the precedent is set. Now every state and local prosecutor in America who wants to make a name for themselves is going to go out there and say, well, who can I target? Can I go after George W. Bush? Can I go after Barack Obama? Can I go after Joe Biden one day? Who can I go after to get famous? And I'll just make something up because all the partisans on my side will rally behind me and it'll make me famous.
Well, I mean, I think that's the danger we've been talking about. The danger is, listen, if this continues on, and it looks like it will, it's not going to stop with the DA in New York today, that it could be the DA in Fulton County, Georgia, that it could be the special counsel or the Department of Justice looking at Mar-a-Lago. It could be the New York Attorney General. There's a lot of Republican DAs, too, all around the country. And if you could suddenly start making state charges into felony charges, then things become a lot more dangerous for Democrats, too. And by the way, that should not be how our system works. I want to make clear here, I am not advocating for that. But, if you are going to do this to us, we will come at you. And we will use the full system as well to come at you. And then our country, Logan, is not the country we grew up in.
Exactly. We got to stop that. Let's go to Philip, who's calling in Belgium on line 3. Philip, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. My question is, would not the Secret Service already have President Trump's fingerprints and possibly DNA samples? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, again,
probably just
they're not
process.
doing that. They're not swabbing. They're not. I don't think they are fingerprinting, the processing. So because he's so well known. It's also because of what this crime is. It speaks to this crime. This probably takes 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, because his security detail. This is not like, again, some serious charge. It's not a violent crime. It's not even a serious financial crime. It's a paperwork issue, which usually, at worst, you would pay a penalty to the FEC for. You would not be indicted. And in this situation, at worst, it's going to be, it would be a financial penalty. No one's going to jail. I mean, for a felony count E in New York, which is the lowest level. And by the way, it shouldn't even move forward in court. The whole case should be thrown out. What we're also going to be looking at, Logan, is this gag order issue, because the president is planning to speak tonight back in Florida, 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. Interestingly enough, the networks are saying they're going to, at least Fox News has said they're going to cover it. I think this is the first time since January 6th that they are going to cover a live speech.
Yes,
by President Trump.
I think that's probably right. Like I said, a lot of those embargoes, a lot of the issues that have come up are now gone, and they're not dealing with them anymore. Whether that's the shadow banning, the actual banning President Trump on all those platforms, the deplatforming of President Trump, a lot of those have now gone away. So that should be pretty interesting to see tonight, even how they cover it. the verbiage they use, I'll be fascinated with that as well. Not just on something like a Right Side Broadcasting or a Newsmax or one of those, be on the mainstream channels again. We'll see what that's like. But I think you have to cover it. If you're going to cover this news where you're watching, President Trump make every little move he's making, you got to cover what he's got to say about it.
Yeah. There was talk that he might talk before, Logan.
Yeah, there was a couple of reporters saying he may say something beforehand, but that hasn't been confirmed, I don't believe.
Yeah,
So-
that would be any minute. I guess he could. It seems like he's pretty far away the way they put barriers from where reporters would
I'm
be.
sure,
but I guess
I'm sure
he
the
could walk over to
NYPD
him.
would much rather he not do that
Yeah, but
today.
guess what? He's the president. He's a former president of the United States and an American citizen. If he wants to, he has absolute right.
Oh
to.
yeah, I'm not saying he just have the right. I'm just saying for
They
security
created this
point of
mess.
view.
The DA created this security mess. Remember, by making up a charge. So whatever happens in New York today, which I think is going to be, there's been like little scuffles here and there, which is not unusual for New York anyways in protest. It's the DA's fault. They decided to make up a criminal charge and bring it against a former president who's now running for office and is the leading candidate in one of the major two parties in the U.S. political system.
Yep. Let's go ahead and take Lawrence from North Carolina, last call of the day, and then we're going to tell you how you can continue on watching us this afternoon when we break all of this down in specifics. Lawrence, you're on the air.
How you doing? I just want to I guess add my perspective that I think while I hear you compare Donald Trump what's happening here to a dictator in another country, but I think we still got to remember too that Donald Trump, even though the case he's been tried for now is probably the lesser of all things he's done, he's given the other side a lot of ammunition to bring charges against him. This is not where
he hasn't been convicted of anything ever. They had tried to impeach him twice, Lawrence, and they failed. They also they brought a special counsel. You're forgetting Mueller. They came up with nothing. So he's not a criminal. They keep trying to make him into this criminal figure. I think Lawrence is buying into this idea that, well, he sounds bad. That's how they've tried to play it. Because of his image or somehow. He's a tough guy, so he must be a criminal. He's like Tony Soprano. He's a lot more sophisticated. Okay, he's a multi-billionaire builder who has gone through the legal process in New York and major cities around the world in constructing mega buildings and huge purchases. That's the opposite of how a criminal operates. Criminals don't follow the rules of buildings. They don't follow building codes and go through the process to get permits and build up multi-billion-dollar businesses that are highly regulated. Highly regulated. He always talks, President Trump, the difference between what he does and what stock traders do is you can actually touch what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty easy. I was in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. It's pretty clear to see where his fingerprints are. Maybe it's the giant text. When I looked out my hotel window, I did not stay in the Trump hotel, but I looked over the Trump hotel, like, a glaring, giant thing. You can see it. You can see it in New York. You can see it in all these different properties. Absolutely. It's going to be a fascinating time. We got 1 minute left. I'm going to encourage you today, regardless of how you're watching right now, we are going to be back live with the Sekulow Brothers podcast. But today it is live, and it is live analysis at 2:15 Eastern time. When the indictment or the arraignment happens, we will be live, and we are going to cover all of it in detail. So you're going to want to join us. Go to SekulowBrothers.com. You're going to find all the places you can subscribe. We encourage you to do that on Rumble because Rumble is our preferred platform. So again, that is on Rumble. You can go rumble.com/SekulowBrothers. Click that follow button, and we will be live at 2:15. Just log back on over. Join us again. We're all going to go take an hour, follow this, have some lunch, and we're going to be back with more. Support the work of the ACLJ at ACLJ.org. You can do that today, part of our matching challenge. All donations are effectively doubled. So do that. We'll be back in just a little bit, 2:15 Eastern, on the Sekulow Brothers podcast.